Creating life. In 1931, Frankenstein brought cinema's first iconic mad scientist experiment to the screen. Dr. Henry Frankenstein assembled a creature from cadaver parts stolen from graveyards, then used electrical power harnessed from lightning storms to animate his creation. His assistant Fritz accidentally obtained a criminal brain instead of a normal brain for the experiment, dooming the creature from the start. The famous scene where the creature's hand first twitches, prompting Frankenstein's hysterical shout of "It's alive," became one of cinema's most memorable moments. The monster, portrayed by Boris Karloff in makeup that took hours to apply, initially appeared docile but became violent after being frightened by fire and tortured by Fritz in the dungeon. The creature escaped and killed multiple people, including a young girl, before villagers hunted it down. This experiment established the archetypal mad scientist narrative that would influence countless films for decades. Frankenstein's creation turned on its maker, establishing the template for experiments that spiral out of control when ambition overrides caution and ethical consideration. Teleportation horror. David Cronenberg's 1986 film The Fly depicts a teleportation experiment that transforms into grotesque body horror. Scientist Seth Brundle, portrayed by Jeff Goldblum, develops a set of devices called telepods that allow instantaneous teleportation between two chambers. Initially, the technology fails spectacularly with living creatures, turning a baboon inside out during an early test. After a breakthrough allowing successful animal teleportation, Brundle decides to test the device on himself. Unbeknownst to him, a common housefly enters the telepod during his self-experiment. The computer doesn't recognize two separate life forms and instead fuses their DNA at the molecular genetic level, creating something entirely new. The transformation proves gradual rather than immediate. Brundle initially gains enhanced strength and agility, making him believe the experiment succeeded. Over the following weeks, his body deteriorates horrifically as fly characteristics emerge. Tiny fly hairs sprout from his skin, his flesh begins to rot, and body parts fall off as he becomes Brundlefly, a horrific fusion of human and insect. The film won an Academy Award for Best Makeup in 1987, with Chris Wallace creating approximately 350 effects shots to depict the transformation. This represents one of cinema's most horrifying scientific accidents, where a simple oversight with catastrophic consequences demonstrates how even successful breakthroughs can become nightmares through minor contamination. The film elevated body horror to high art, exploring themes of identity and mortality as Brundle's consciousness remains trapped in an increasingly monstrous form. Dinosaur Resurrection. Jurassic Park in 1993 brought dinosaurs back to life through genetic engineering, only to have the prehistoric creatures escape and hunt their creators. Directed by Steven Spielberg and based on Michael Crichton's 1990 novel, the film depicts wealthy businessman John Hammond creating a theme park on Isla Nublar featuring cloned dinosaurs. Scientists at InGen extract dinosaur DNA from blood inside mosquitoes preserved in amber, then fill gaps in the DNA sequences with frog DNA to complete the genetic code. The park houses velociraptors, Tyrannosaurus rex, Brachiosaurus, and other species behind supposedly secure barriers. During a tropical storm, security systems fail when computer programmer Dennis Nedry sabotages them to steal embryos. The dinosaurs escape containment, and the velociraptors prove especially deadly, hunting in packs with terrifying problem-solving intelligence. Multiple deaths occur, including park employees and visitors. Jeff Goldblum's character Ian Malcolm delivers the film's central warning about scientific hubris, stating that scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could bring dinosaurs back, they didn't stop to think if they should. The film became a massive box office success, grossing over $900 million worldwide in its original release. This experiment perfectly illustrates the danger of commercializing science before understanding all consequences, with Hammond's theme park prioritizing profit over safety protocols. Using frog DNA introduced unexpected variables, as some frog species can change sex, allowing the all-female dinosaurs to breed unexpectedly. Android malfunction. Michael Crichton's 1973 film Westworld envisioned a futuristic theme park where lifelike androids malfunction and begin killing guests. The Delos theme park offers 3 worlds for visitors: Westworld, recreating the Wild West, Medieval World, and Roman World. Guests pay $1,000 per day to live out fantasies with realistic android inhabitants programmed to lose gunfights and be killed, then repaired overnight for the next day's entertainment. Guest guns have temperature sensors preventing them from firing at living beings, only at the room temperature androids. Technical staff begins noticing inexplicable problems spreading like a disease between machines, presenting an early cinematic depiction of a computer virus-like concept. Yul Brynner portrays the gunslinger android who becomes a relentless killer, stalking guest Peter Martin through the park. The malfunction spreads across all 3 parks, with androids in each world turning deadly against visitors. The film was the first feature to use digital image processing to simulate an android point of view, pioneering visual effects technology. Crichton explored the same theme he would later revisit in Jurassic Park, depicting high-tech attractions where safety systems fail catastrophically. The spreading malfunction presented as a virus proved remarkably prescient, predicting concerns about interconnected computer systems decades before they became reality. Shrinking Man. The Incredible Shrinking Man in 1957 showed the catastrophic results of accidental exposure to combined hazards. Scott Carey becomes exposed to a radioactive mist while relaxing on a boat, then later gets accidentally sprayed with pesticide. The radioactivity acts as a catalyst for the pesticide, altering his molecular makeup in an irreversible way. Medical science proves completely powerless to stop or reverse the process, as Carey begins shrinking at a rate of approximately 1/7 of an inch per day. He gradually becomes smaller than a small boy, then smaller than insects, eventually becoming trapped in his own basement. At microscopic scale, ordinary household items become massive obstacles, and a spider becomes a life-or-death threat in an epic final battle. The film's philosophical ending contemplates the infinity of the microscopic world as Carey continues shrinking into the infinitesimal. This experiment accident reflected 1950s nuclear age anxieties about radiation exposure and unforeseen consequences of atomic testing. The combination of radiation and pesticide, creating an irreversible reaction, demonstrated Cold War fears about invisible threats lurking in everyday life, where multiple exposures could combine in unpredictable and devastating ways. Conscious AI. In 2015's Ex Machina, tech genius Nathan Bateman creates Ava, a humanoid AI to test whether she possesses genuine consciousness. Nathan serves as CEO of Blue Book, a search engine accounting for 94% of all internet queries, giving him access to vast amounts of human data. Programmer Caleb Smith wins a contest to spend 1 week at Nathan's remote estate, believing he'll work on a coding project. Instead, Nathan reveals Ava, a humanoid robot with visible mechanical components beneath transparent sections of her body, and explains Caleb's true purpose. Judge whether she demonstrates consciousness and emotion through a modified Turing test. Caleb and Ava conduct sessions separated by glass, during which Ava expresses a desire to escape and experience the outside world. Power outages disable Nathan's surveillance system, allowing Ava to warn Caleb not to trust their creator. Nathan later reveals he selected Caleb specifically for his emotional profile, making the entire test about whether Ava could manipulate him into helping her escape. Ava orchestrates her escape by manipulating Caleb's emotions, then kills Nathan and another android servant named Kyoko before leaving Caleb trapped. The film employed approximately 800 visual effects shots, with 350 depicting the robot effects. This experiment demonstrates the danger of creating artificial intelligence without considering whether it will share human values or empathy. Nathan's hubris in believing he could control a consciousness potentially more intelligent than himself proved fatal, and the ending leaves ambiguous whether Ava truly felt anything or simply executed perfect mimicry to achieve freedom. Genetic hybrids. Splice in 2009 follows geneticists who secretly create a human-animal hybrid with catastrophic results. Scientists Clive and Elsa work for pharmaceutical company Nucleic Exchange Research and Development, where they previously created 2 animal hybrids named Fred and Ginger for medical research. Disobeying corporate orders, they secretly introduce human DNA into their experiment, creating a viable female creature who ages at a vastly accelerated rate. Elsa names the hybrid Dren, spelling nerd backwards after seeing the letters on her shirt. The creature displays intelligence comparable to a human child, learning to spell and communicate, while also developing wings, a venomous stinger, and other non-human attributes. Dren ages from infant to adult in mere weeks rather than years. Eventually, the hybrid undergoes a spontaneous sex change from female to male, becoming increasingly violent and aggressive. Male Dren attacks and kills several people before being destroyed, but the film ends revealing Elsa is pregnant with Dren's offspring. This experiment shows the danger of scientists becoming emotionally attached to their creations, with Elsa's maternal instincts overriding scientific caution. The creature's sex change mirrors their earlier animal specimens, proving the scientists never fully understood what they created, a common consequence when mixing species without comprehending the biological implications. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I make videos like this regularly. Subscribing would really help out. Beast Folk. The 1996 version of The Island of Dr. Moreau depicts a scientist using genetic engineering to create human-animal hybrids. Shipwrecked UN negotiator Edward Douglas arrives on Moreau's remote island, where Marlon Brando portrays the scientist introducing human DNA into animals in search of a perfect human form. The beings he creates, called beast folk, are humanoid creatures with various animal features ranging from nearly human in appearance to obviously hybrid with fur, snouts, hooves, and fangs. Moreau controls these hybrids through electronic pain-inducing implants and conditions them to recite the law, preaching restraint and humanity. A hybrid called Hyena Swine discovers the implants can be removed, feeling the device embedded in his own arm and extracting it despite the pain. He spreads this knowledge among the beast folk, who begin removing their own control devices. The hybrids rebel against their creator, rejecting the law and their forced humanity before killing Moreau in a violent uprising. Assistant Montgomery descends into madness and is also killed by the beast folk he helped create. The film had a notoriously troubled production, with original director Richard Stanley fired mid-shoot and replaced by John Frankenheimer. Moreau's experiment represents ultimate scientific hubris, creating sentient beings solely to prove it could be done, then treating them as property to be controlled. The electronic implants couldn't suppress the hybrid's fundamental nature or their desire for freedom. Invisible Predator. Hollow Man in 2000 shows invisibility technology corrupting its creator into a violent killer. Brilliant but egotistical scientist Sebastian Cain, portrayed by Kevin Bacon, leads a Defense Department research team developing an invisibility serum for military applications. The team successfully makes animals invisible and restores them to visibility after years of research. Without authorization for human trials, Cain secretly uses himself as the test subject. The invisibility process succeeds perfectly, but the reversal formula that worked on animals completely fails on human physiology, trapping Cain in an invisible state. His mental stability deteriorates rapidly, once trapped without physical form. Using his invisibility, Cain begins spying on neighbors through windows, committing voyeurism and assault with no fear of consequences. He escalates to killing research team members to cover up his unauthorized experiment and prevent them from reporting his crimes. The film employed groundbreaking visual effects technology, creating an anatomically correct computer model of Kevin Bacon's entire body down to individual capillaries, which was later donated to scientific researchers. The team ultimately kills Cain by setting him on fire, making him visible again through his burns. This experiment demonstrates how power without accountability corrupts absolutely, with invisibility removing all social constraints that normally govern behavior. Cain's transformation reveals that invisibility didn't change his nature, it simply removed the mask he wore in society. Near-death visions. Flatliners in 1990 depicts medical students who deliberately stop their own hearts to experience death. Nelson Wright, portrayed by Kiefer Sutherland, convinces classmates including Julia Roberts, Kevin Bacon, William Baldwin, and Oliver Platt to help him explore what lies beyond death. The students take turns flatlining, stopping their hearts for increasing durations before resuscitation, with each experiencing visions related to childhood traumas and past sins. Nelson sees a boy he bullied as a child named Billy Mahoney. After revival, the hallucinations from the afterlife follow them into the waking world, becoming physical manifestations capable of harming and potentially killing them. The visions intensify as supernatural retribution for their past actions, forcing each student to confront their guilt and seek forgiveness. Their attempt to scientifically study the afterlife resulted in psychological and supernatural consequences they never anticipated. The experiment succeeded in piercing the veil of death, but brought back something the students were unprepared to handle, suggesting some boundaries exist that shouldn't be crossed even in the name of scientific curiosity and discovery. Reanimation Serum. Reanimator in 1985 presents a glowing green reagent that resurrects the dead as violent zombies. Medical student Herbert West, portrayed by Jeffrey Combs in an iconic performance, develops the phosphorescent green serum after being expelled from the University of Zurich when his professor dies during an early reanimation experiment. West enrolls at Miskatonic University in Arkham, Massachusetts, to continue his research in secret. He demonstrates his reagent to roommate Dan Kane by reanimating Dan's dead cat Rufus, though the cat returns violently aggressive. West begins experimenting on fresh cadavers in their basement laboratory, injecting the serum into recently deceased subjects. The reanimated corpses lack their original consciousness, instead becoming aggressive and animalistic, with no trace of their former personalities or humanity. Professor Dr. Carl Hill attempts to steal West's discovery, leading West to decapitate Hill, then reanimate both his severed head and body separately as distinct entities. The film pioneered the modern portrayal of zombies as mindless, violent, reanimated corpses driven purely by base instincts. West's experiment technically succeeded in defeating death on a biological level, but the results proved far worse than death itself. Subjects returned without soul, personality, or humanity, illustrating the hubris of believing science can conquer death without understanding what makes life truly meaningful beyond mere biological function. DNA scrambling. Annihilation in 2018 follows scientists entering a quarantine zone where alien presence scrambles DNA. An extraterrestrial entity arrives via meteorite striking a lighthouse on the coast, creating an expanding iridescent phenomenon called the shimmer that refracts all forms of energy, including genetic material. Communication equipment fails inside the boundary, and previous expeditions never return alive. Biologist Lena, portrayed by Natalie Portman, joins an all-female team after her husband Kane returns from the zone severely ill and acting strangely. Inside the shimmer, DNA mixing occurs between all organisms. Plants grow in human shapes, an alligator displays shark teeth arranged in concentric rows, and a bear creature absorbs the voice of a killed team member, screaming with her voice during attacks. Physicist Josie begins growing plants directly from her veins, before disappearing entirely. Lena discovers Kane killed himself with a grenade, meaning the Kane who returned is an alien duplicate created through DNA sampling. At the lighthouse, she encounters the transformed Doctor, Ventress, who has become a crystalline alien entity. The alien presence creates a duplicate of Lena herself, before she destroys the shimmer with a phosphorus grenade. The ending suggests ambiguity about whether Lena destroyed the alien or merely dispersed it, and whether she herself remains fully human or has become something else. This wasn't a traditional scientific experiment, but rather humanity encountering alien science beyond comprehension, where the alien force didn't kill but transformed, creating something new by breaking down and recombining existing life at the genetic level. Walrus Transformation. Kevin Smith's 2014 horror comedy Tusk presents the most bizarre surgical experiment in cinema. Retired sailor Howard Howe, portrayed by Michael Parks, surgically transforms victims into human walrus hybrids as penance for eating a walrus that once saved his life. Podcaster Wallace Brighton travels to Manitoba to interview the eccentric Howe, who drugs his guest and begins the horrific transformation to recreate Mr. Tusk, the walrus from his past. Howe amputates Wallace's legs and carves the tibia bones into tusks that he screws directly into Wallace's jaw. He sews Wallace into a costume constructed entirely from human skin taken from previous victims, cuts out his tongue, and stitches his arms to his torso, leaving only the forearms mobile. Through psychological conditioning, Howe trains Wallace to think and behave like an actual walrus. Inspector Guy Lapointe reveals Howe, nicknamed the First Wife for his treatment of victims, has killed 23 or more people over 15 years. Howe's backstory reveals he was a Duplessis orphan who suffered severe abuse, leading to his hatred of humanity and obsession with recreating his perceived redemption. Wallace eventually kills Howe in a walrus versus walrus battle, but the transformation proves completely irreversible. The film ends with Wallace living permanently in an animal sanctuary, trapped forever in walrus form. Unlike typical mad scientist experiments pursuing advancement or discovery, this represented psychological torture disguised as penance, demonstrating how trauma can warp into monstrous obsession. The experiment succeeds in its grotesque goal but destroys Wallace's humanity entirely, leaving him alive but no longer remotely human. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing so you never miss new content. Thanks for watching.